Okay, at the end of this video, I feel like I need to explain the ending here and why Todd Phillips did what he did. I think he had a good reason. I'll give you a heads up if you haven't seen the movie yet, so don't panic. I think I can maybe get you to like this movie, or maybe get you to hate it even more. Who knows? Joker Folie Deux. Yeah, I know I probably butchered the French, but Folie Deux means delusion or mental illness shared by two people in close associations, sometimes an infectious mental illness. Pretty clever in my opinion for a title. Joker Folie Deux is directed by Todd Phillips, famously known for directing movies like Old School, The Hangover, Road Trip, Due Date, and of course the first Joker. It's also written by him and Scott Silver. The movie stars Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, Lady Gaga as Lee Quinzel, Brendan Gleeson plays a guard at the infamous Arkham Asylum, and Catherine Keener, who plays Arthur's attorney, is also in it, and I've always been a fan of hers. And Harry Lottie surprises us with his DC version of Harvey Dent, who becomes Two-Face in the comics, and in the movies, and everywhere else. So just a side note here, I heard someone asking after the movie why Lee Quinzel wasn't called Harley in the film. Well, she was, sort of. Not to go all Batman fanboy here, but she was created in 1992 for the Batman animated series. And Harley Quinn's actual name is Harleen Frances Quinzel. She was depicted as Joker's sidekick and love interest, and she was also Poison Ivy's best friend in the show. She was originally meant to be in only one episode of the animated series, but the writers loved her and she had a huge fan following, and her character became huge in the DC world. She was a former psychologist, and she falls in love with the Joker during her internship at Gotham City's Arkham Asylum. Hence the Folie Deux. At least according to the Batman Adventures Mad Love issue comic in 1994. So now let's go back to the film. I love how the movie starts. It starts with the Warner Brothers logo in that Looney Tunes cartoon way, and you get a Joker cartoon to start before the film, kind of like the beginning of Roger Rabbit. This cartoon pretty much explains the whole premise of the film, actually. The dual personalities who are Arthur Fleck and the Joker. It lets you know right away what this movie is going to be about, and I thought it was pretty creative and pretty great. After the vibrant colors and sounds of the cartoon, we see Arthur in a dark, depressing cell in the ward of the asylum. It's called the I Ward. Every day is the same for Arthur. He wakes up, takes his medication, watches cartoons, chain smokes a ton of cigarettes that he gets from telling these jokes to the guards. On his way to a TV interview, he's taken to B Ward, which is a minimum security ward, where he passes by a music therapy class and sees Lee Quinzel. And there's an instant connection. One of the guards, who's played by Brendan Gleeson, gets him into music therapy, mainly because the guard himself has a fascination with singing, and he wants to take part in it. While in the music class, Arthur falls in love with Lee and uses that love as a sort of mental escape from the asylum and the dark, dank places and being in the hole. It gives him hope and brings a light to his dark place. And that's where the movie turns into a musical. A lot of people I've heard from were really disappointed in the musical part of the film. They weren't against it being a musical, but they were against, they weren't, I guess, satisfied with the music itself and the scenes. And I think they thought the music really didn't have a point to the actual story. But I actually like what they tried to do here. The music, I think, represents a few things. For one, I think it's a means for mental escape from the prison that he's living in. It gives him a peace. It brings out the joy in his life. It brings him out of the dark world that he's living in and into a more colorful, happier world that he's in control of, or has the sense he's in control of. Second, he's in love, and the music represents that love and that feeling of a new love and that feeling of wanting to sing about that new love. And three, he's working out some issues in these songs at his trial. He has a possible betrayal that he sings about. I think it gives him a way to work out these issues in his head. It's a way that he can express himself in a place where he can't express himself without getting beat up. metaphor. It's part of his delusion. It shows how he lives in a fantasy world because of what happened to him as a kid, because of his trauma. Delusion is how he copes. Delusion of being a good comedian. Delusion of having a girlfriend in the first film. After he's involved in the music class, music becomes part of the delusion and part of the story. The teacher of the music class reinforces this by telling everyone that music is a way to express yourself without violence. It helps you to work through these things emotionally. I personally appreciated the musical numbers. I thought they all worked, but I felt like it was missing a little something. I wanted something like La La Land, but maybe that was the point. Maybe it was meant to feel out of place and awkward and wrong being in a movie like this. Maybe it was to make you feel part of the delusion. I enjoyed the musical numbers, and at the same time, I didn't. The first part of the movie in the asylum was really great. It felt kind of like a Shawshank movie in the beginning. Even the love story was sweet and interesting, and you felt for Arthur, even though he killed 6 people, including his mother in the first film. Arthur is really weak and fragile in the beginning of this movie, and when he meets Harley, he starts to feel alive again. There's an interesting story of dual personalities and his struggle to be Arthur and not the Joker. He's tired of being both in a sense. The problem is that Harley is in love with the Joker and not with Arthur. In one part of the movie, she asks him to show her his true self, and she brings in this makeup that she smuggled into his cell and starts putting it on him. And it almost feels like she's trying to make him something that he doesn't want to be. The second half of the movie gets a little stale in some parts. It's the trial of Arthur. Harvey Dent is the DA, and he makes the case against Arthur. Arthur's lawyer, Marianne, actually cares for Arthur and is doing her best to show that he has dual personalities. And it's only because of his trauma from the past that is causing him to have this other personality. And the Joker is the one who's responsible for the murders and not Arthur. He ends up firing his attorney and decides to defend himself. This courtroom drama in the second act is pretty dry at times and a little boring. It rehashes a lot of the first movie in a lot of ways, and it isn't really that interesting. There are a few good scenes, but it kind of drags. But it's not a movie killer. Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic in the film, and he's really fun to watch. There isn't really a scene in this movie that his acting was bad. I really enjoyed pretty much every scene he was in. In the beginning of the movie, he's actually pretty scary. He's quiet and gives these blank stares. It's actually pretty haunting and freaky. The movie, in my opinion, is worth seeing just for his performance. I like that he didn't sing like he did in Walk the Line. It wasn't good. They didn't make the Joker this fantastic singer. It was realistic to the story. Joaquin is probably one of the best actors of our generation, and he's absolutely fantastic in this role. Lady Gaga, I thought, was impressive too. She was endearing. Her take on Harley was a lot different than the Margot Robbie version, which I did love, by the way. But this performance seemed a little bit more realistic and not over the top and cartoony. She seemed like a real person, even though I didn't like what her character did, especially at the end. It wouldn't make sense if she hadn't done those things that she did. I know that doesn't make any sense unless you've seen the movie, so sorry about that. I also thought that, again, Brendan Gleeson was great in this role as the guard, Jackie Sullivan. He was a pretty interesting character, sort of a brutal guy, but sometimes with some heart, or maybe it was ingenuine, I don't know. He played it in a way that I wasn't really quite sure. There have been a lot of Jokers over the years, played by a lot of different actors, some fantastic, some not so great. So when Todd Phillips' Joker came out, some people loved this version and some not so much. Some wanted the version from the comics or something more like Heath Ledger. Some even wanted the Mark Hamill Joker from the animated series. I thought this version was a great vision of the character in another universe. It was gritty and it felt more real, and I loved that it was set in the 80s. It was more psychological and uncomfortable at times. It was a homage to 2 Martin Scorsese films, Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. The first film has a lot of the King of Comedy story to it. Robert De Niro plays a really unfunny comic trying to get on a talk show hosted by his hero, Jerry Lewis. There are so many similarities, and I think that's why this movie doesn't work for a lot of people. It was trying to be a Scorsese film in a way. Set in the 80s, it feels like it, and it's shot like it, which I love. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. But when you make a sequel to something like that, you're kind of boxed in. You don't really know where to go. I wondered if he was doing a Baz Luhrmann thing. He made a movie about dance, then Shakespearean word, then musicals. It was a trilogy of the arts. It was a great representation of all three, with Strictly Ballroom, Moulin Rouge, and Romeo and Juliet. Now about that ending and why I thought Todd Phillips did what he did. If you haven't seen the movie, go ahead and click off because you're not going to want to hear what I have to say about this thing. I'll give you a second or two. Okay, so the ending, Arthur is told he has a visitor, and he walks down the hallway with another inmate behind him. The inmate asks him if he wants to hear a joke, and in a sweet way, Arthur agrees to hear it. Now, at this point, he's shut off the Joker. He wants to be Arthur Fleck. He's done with the Joker. He knows who he wants to be, even at the loss of his true love, Harley. The inmate tells the joke, which I can't remember exactly, and then stabs Arthur to death. As Arthur lays dying, the inmate in the background cuts his face into a smile, kind of like Heath Ledger. And at that point, you realize that he is the real Joker, and that the two Joker movies were pretty much pointless in a sense, making fans go crazy. And in my theater, they were yelling at the screen. I think Todd Phillips did this for one main reason. When the first Joker came out, DC was in the process of changing hands. James Gunn comes on as CEO, and the Zack Snyder universe pretty much dissolves. I think this is Todd Phillips' goodbye to the Joker that he wanted and that he envisioned. He kills his Joker off to make way for the version of the Joker that the original fans wanted, and probably where James Gunn is going to take the Joker in his new DC universe. If you go back to the Sonny and Cher skit dream musical that Harley and Joker were in, Harley actually says, "Let's give the fans what they want." And I think that's pointing to the end of this movie. I think that Phillips did this ending to save his version of the Joker, to keep it out of the hands of James Gunn and DC, to give him dignity and indignity. I think that he was saying that the new DC killed his Joker, maybe. He gave his Joker fans a way to say goodbye, to tie up loose ends, to say that's all, folks, like the Joker does at the end of his trial. I think that's why this movie comes full circle. It starts in Arkham, ends in Arkham. He escapes for a short time, gets caught, and then he goes back to Arkham Asylum. I don't think this new Joker will even be in any more movies. I don't think that would make any sense considering the timeline. I think he's just there to make a statement. For good or bad, there's a new era of DC and the old one's dead. And I think they're saying that it's time for the fans to move on, I guess. So that's my take on the Joker. It has some really great moments. The cinematography was beautiful, shot on the Arri Alexa 65mm camera. The composition of all the shots were incredible. The acting by Phoenix and GaGa was fun to watch. It's a little slow at times, and even though I hated the ending, a part of me was okay with it. I personally wanted a different story, but I understood why the story went the way that it did. I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more if it wasn't a Joker movie, but all in all, I think it's worth seeing, in my opinion. Actually pretty great. So personally, I would give this movie 7 out of 10 stars, if that was my rating system. It's a great movie. Go see it. Go see it in IMAX. It's beautiful. So what do you think of the Joker Folie? Do you plan to see it? And if you have seen it, I want to know what you thought of the ending and what you thought of the musical numbers. I really want to know, so let me know in the comments below. I love responding to you guys. It's a lot of fun to talk film with you. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this review helpful. And thank you to all who have subscribed. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. And remember, don't wait till it streams. Support your local theaters and let's see it together.